this is the entire group that's going to meet today from our commission because the others are out of town, and so thankfully for Vimeo, they have a chance to go through this before the meeting. We have 2 presentations, several proclamations, and then 2 public appearances. One is going to be on the traffic up at Carpenter's Way, and the other is on short-term rentals, specifically Airbnb in the Lake Morgan neighborhood. Then public hearings, so that brings us to ordinances 1, which is, you can take it from here.
Okay. All right. The first ordinance is coming back to you after a review by the state. This is simply an update to the water element of the comp plan. It doesn't have any kind of real substantive elements to it like the CFWI rule that we challenged did. This is more aspirational. We'll endeavor to institute conservation-type measures, an inverted rate structure to encourage conservation, concurrency issues, making sure that it's available for development, that type of thing. But it's nothing that's really going to find us substantively.
Okay. Any questions on that? Yes.
I do. So, Palmer, who will be working on this? So this is something like we have to kind of show a verifiable conservation educational program?
Which is already in place.
We have.
So, like how, I mean, I'm just curious, how do we mark like whether or not people are seeing it, hearing it, response rate, what do we have as far as like kind of some data analytics, like, we're going to give this month we're going to really focus on it. I mean, are they giving any kind of metrics to show kind of?
Well, actually, the presentation on Monday is water conservation by Bill Anderson, so
okay,
he should
so
be able to
he'll
answer
tell
some of
us
those
how
questions,
that's going to work.
I can tell you, PWC, we lead in this in the county.
Okay, because I know, when we did like the recycling efforts and Jean Jen would come and talk to us and then, you could really see that people knew that we were gearing up, they got it.
And they made a difference.
Yeah, it made a big difference. You were talking about it. So
They do have some data, so
Yeah.
we'll go into that on Monday.
okay, because I just think of, watching children's programs with my kids. When you're brushing your teeth and having so much fun, you never leave the water on. I mean, it still talks to me when I brush my teeth. So I feel like they're powerful, and I don't have the same memory yet with our water conservation, but I'd like to have that same messaging going around in my mind. So, and for all of our citizens, so I'd love to hear more about that.
Okay, very good. So, Mr. Anderson, be cued for that.
Okay. All right, 2 is the second reading of the outdoor covered play pavilion at Geneva Classical Academy.
Questions on that?
Did we get any resident feedback on that at all?
I know that there was one resident, was it 1 or 2 that live on Jay Place across New Jersey from the academy and the church there that were in opposition or just concerned a little
One
bit.
across the street and then one to the rear, and they were both, one of the concerns was about where they were placing it. They wanted to try to maybe move it more to the parking lot, but they had reasons why they placed it there. It was pretty intentional.
I would think the rear would have bigger issue than the front, but
The person in the rear asked specifically for some more landscaping to kind of buffer that, and that was added as a condition.
Exactly, that was added as a condition, and the problem with the structure moving further east is it's right on the edge of the floodplain. So if that were to happen, then there'd be a whole bunch of bigger issues. And so,
And I think we have slides we can put up if you all have any questions and want to see this. But I think one point to make is that the activity is already occurring, and this is just adding a
Provide shelter.
covered shelter for that same activity. So the noise is already there, correct?
Right.
Which is a pleasant noise of children. All right. Number 3.
All right, 3 and 4 are related. They're related to the addition of 120 multifamily dwelling units at that development just to the west of Hardin Boulevard and south of the frontage road off of Pipkin Creek Road. So number 3 is the change in the comp plan designation for this property from neighborhood activity center to residential medium. Then 4 is the actual zoning that provides for that additional 120 multifamily units.
I have a quick,
Yes,
very
ma'am.
quick question. In a neighborhood activity center, just remind me what that is.
it would have allowed for kind of a mix of retail, small level office.
Okay.
And so we're changing some commercial and office
Right.
for the residential.
Got it. Thank you.
Any other questions? 5.
Number 5 is the city's ordinance that ratifies the action of the Lakeland Area Mass Transit District, which annexed 2 properties into their boundaries, which will now be subject to their half-mil ad valorem tax. One is the a hospital property at the northwest corner of the interstate and Kathleen Road, and the other is a property in the Lake Gibson area. I'm not sure if there's anything proposed for that property at the time.
It's actually under construction right now, 72 apartment units on the west side of Gibson Drive, and it backs up to Wedgewood Estates, and so that's under construction as we speak.
So this is something that's already been taken by the Citrus Connection, and as a condition of annexations, they require the consent of the property owners. So both of these property owners have consented to inclusion in the boundaries. Under resolutions, the first one is one of our resolutions that requires two readings. This is to expand the Brownfield area. We previously designated the old Florida Towel site as a Brownfield area. The city owns another several acres just to the north of that triangle-shaped property that we've been dealing with for a while. This is at the request of the potential developers of that property that it be designated as a Brownfield area. Consequence of that is really just that it will allow, when that is developed, the developers to get tax breaks on the building materials for the property. It really does not have any effect on the city's revenue.
Does that designation typically need to be done prior to development, or it just helps knowing that it's already been designated? Can it be done in arrears?
It's been done in arrears before.
Okay, we've done it.
I don't know if it can be done subsequent to CO, but I know it's been done when construction was underway.
You'd lose some of the benefit anyway, if you didn't.
If you waited that long.
Right.
And then the second item is a conduit financing deal. We have done these several times in the past for nonprofit organizations in the area. We've done it for the Lakeland Regional Hospital. We've done it for Southeastern, and we've done it for Florida Southern. I don't know if we've done it for Florida Southern more than once, but this is, I know that we have done it to allow them to refinance under more favorable rates, and that's what's going on here as well. We previously did a conduit bond deal for them. They want to take advantage of the rapidly vanishing favorable rate environment. The most important thing for our purposes is that because these are conduit deals, the city has no liability for these. And all the documents, the resolution, the financing agreements that are attached to it specify that. So anybody that purchases these notes would not be able to look to the city in case there's a default on the notes. They can't force us to raise taxes or go into any of our revenue whatsoever. We're totally held harmless. It's pass-through.
Is this your department, Mike? Who does it? I just would like a 30,000-foot view of kind of like what this conduit.
I think actually Palmer hit it right on the head.
Okay.
It's.
So why are they going? Why are we even
They can
involved as a city?
Because in Florida Southern's case, they're using our rating.
Okay.
But that's all they're using is our rating. You're allowed to do that as a municipality for other entities. Even Carpenter's Home, we have some outstanding debt with Carpenter's Home has some outstanding debt using us as conduit. But you usually see it with nonprofits.
Does
We'll
that,
use us.
if a whole bunch of people, let's just say 30 people wanted to do this, does this eventually drop our rating if we have
Does
too many
not,
people
no.
tied to it?
Does not affect us at all in any way. Don't have to, we always note it, but that's it. It's just, here's what conduit is outstanding for informational purposes. It isn't used in the matrix for our debt ratios in any
No
fashion
covenants or liability.
at all. There's no liability. It's very clear in there that the third-party obligor is responsible for all the debt, not the issuer.
So they just get the benefit of our good rating. Is really
Exactly right. That's exactly right.
Well, especially in large sums.
right. Yeah.
And actually, if you looked at it, the only risk a city has with agreeing to conduit debt is reputation risk, and that's absolutely it. And that's if someone were to default. I would just call it reputation risk. But here, we actually improve the risk that's already outstanding because they're cutting their rate in half. And Terry noted Terry Dennis, they're going to save tens of millions of dollars on this reissuance. So it's a great deal for them.
Well, I've passed around at the meeting, I've done this in previous meetings as well, that you have to sign a certificate that says that you haven't violated the Sunshine Law in relation to this deal, and that you don't have a conflict of interest with either its Truist Bank and Florida Southern College. So. All right, if there are any other questions, that would take us to CRA.
All right.
All right, Jerry, you want to address the two CRA items?
Sure. The first one is for the build-out of the Catalyst 2.0 system that you've been hearing about. This is an interactive digital modeling system that's going to be built out by the Apiary, which is a Lakeland-based design firm that specializes in photorealistic architectural visualization. And the goal is that hopefully this will inform development opportunities and help market the city to potential partners. So the initial phase has already been funded by the LEDC. It was $100,000 for phase one, and this task authorization would be for phase two, which is broken out into two parts, $100,000 and $180,000 respectively, and for a total amount not to exceed $280,000. The entire project cost is projected to be $380,000, but that final $100,000 will be addressed in next year's budget cycle. And I don't know if Elise wants to add anything to that.
Well, I'll just add that the commission will receive a full presentation on Monday from the EDC. Katie Worthington-Necker will be with us, and so get about a 10-minute show on the software and where we are now with it and the potential for the rest of the build-out.
All right, next.
The next one is another task authorization. We marked this as a potential consent item. It's pretty straightforward. It's Mary's Bagels Cafe, which is currently under construction over on 8th Street and North Florida Avenue. They qualified for the infill adaptive reuse grant funding for this project last year. And as part of that approval, the advisory board did approve some expenditures for the improvements to the alley. The CRA and the city own parcels just south of this property on the other side of the alley. And so cross-access is required as part of the effort to consolidate the amount of drive aisles that we have hit on the US 98 corridor. The Public Works did draft these designs and plans, but they opted to outsource the actual construction of the project. And we're piggybacking off a county contract with Central Concrete Products to perform the work. And this is for an amount not to exceed $69,369. And that would be to improve the alleyway and the sidewalks around it.
Any problem with leaving that on consent or any questions? Okay, thank you. That takes us to City Manager.
Good morning, everyone. I've got a couple of items for presentation. The first item is regarding a recommendation for the city's mid-year table of organization modifications, appropriations, and associated D appropriations. Modifications may involve adding, deleting, pay adjustments, or reclassifying positions to meet departmental operational needs or improve service delivery. When we were at strategic planning, there were questions about how the city throughout the year may look to make adjustments, and we talked about a process that we do at not only at the budget but at our mid-year point as well, that involves the things that I discussed a moment ago. There are multiple departments throughout the city that are involved in this process. We have what we call a Pmf Committee, which is comprised of our assistant city manager, our finance director, and our HR director, and their associated staff to assist. They evaluate the request, and ultimately is presented for the city manager's final decision. Based on the request this year, it results, there are associated appropriations, but also offsetting D appropriations, and so the net for this year is a savings of $146,000. There's more savings to the bottom line of the budget than just what is presented there, and so I can go into a little more detail about that on Monday. And so the request is going to be for the associated appropriations, again, that will net the savings of $146,000 in the adjustments to our operations. Any questions on that?
Any questions on any of those reductions? Reductions are good in expenditures.
Okay. Yes, nice to see a good savings there, and the departments work hard, to make adjustments where we can realize a cost savings anytime that it's available to us. The next item that I have is regarding an RFP for broker consulting services for property and casualty insurance. That RFP went through the process that the commission's familiar with. We have 3 firms that responded to the RFP. There was a 7-member committee. That was the selection committee on this particular item. The selection committee invited the top 2 prospective firms for a presentation interview round to present on specific evaluation criteria at exclusive pre-scheduled times. Following that, this was the item that was pulled from our last agenda. There was some discussion regarding the application of our local vendor preference points that the committee was involved in. Basically, what happened here is when you look at the scoring, you have Arthur J. Gallagher Risk Management that, following the applications of the local preference, scored 1227. And let me just clarify, Gallagher did not receive local preference points. And then you had Risk Management Associates, Brown & Brown, who did receive local vendor preference points. And so Brown & Brown then outscored Arthur J. Gallagher by a score of 1,236 to 1,227, so it was very close. In the ordinance, there is the availability of a waiver of local preference points if the services or goods that are being procured justify that. There was a lot of discussion on this one about power generation. Power generation is the city's single largest risk exposure, and there's engineering resources and safety loss prevention from Brown & Brown was presented as being limited to 40 hours plus added costs for additional hours, and a third party is used for those services. With Gallagher, they provide unlimited hours with no added cost and brings some significant experience with an in-house staff that the city has worked with on past claims. Just to give you some perspective, since 2014, the city of Lakeland has filed 7 claims and received a total of just under $11 million. So the concern was power generation, and the committee ultimately voted 4-2 to award to the lowest scoring of the 2, but again, specifically related to those coverages on power generation. And so the recommendation is going to be to have the city negotiate a contract that will remain in effect for 3 years with 2 additional 1-year renewal options, and that would be for an annual fee for services of $125,000 with Gallagher Risk Management. That's the item as presented, and we'll stand for any questions.
Any comments or questions?
I'm just curious why the interview score is higher for Gallagher. Is that directly related to the power generation, or that seems like a pretty big discrepancy between those 2 on the interview score. I was just curious as to what would be the reason for that.
Yeah, there's 2 phases that occurred there. Kind of the original is based on the written submittals, but then there is an interview round, and just the committee scores those as they feel is justified. There are folks here who were part of the committee. I don't know if they want to add any additional comments to that, but there was definitely the largest difference of any of the scoring was in that interview round.
I think and I'll just speak to that a little bit, the interview allows you to meet the people that you'll be working with, and in this case, there was a group that we'd already been working with. But the fact that on that interview, there were the engineering specialists there, and they spoke very well about the projects that they worked with the city and the amount of time that they've been able and will be able to present to us. And I think some of the others that were on the committee are here if they want to speak to that. But just that the message that you receive from the interview is how the score is reflected on that.
So in the 2, I was there, in the 2 presentations, the incumbent, obviously knows about our power generation, like backwards, forwards, helped us catch things in the past and see different things. The newcomer basically didn't delve in as much and as further into the presentation process in utility and electric, and especially generation. So they've had some experience with utilities, but not to the depth that Gallagher's had with, energy and everything that we have there. So that was kind of the discrepancy. And one of the things, just I think, taking away from the presentation was when they continued to speak about their person or their expert on power generation that they utilize, which Gallagher utilizes too. Like, they all utilize subject matter experts. You can't have everybody in-house, you know what I mean, for everything. It's just too many disciplines to handle. So in their presentation, they specifically kept referencing like one person, and I think the committee went back and said, is that your only person that you have for power generation experience? They're like, no, there's a team underneath them, but in their presentation, you didn't gather that until there were some pointed questions towards the end.
I scored Brown and Brown higher on the interview, on the proposal than I did Gallagher. But once we got a chance to talk to them and ask questions, they did not present the fact that they recognized that our electric utility, especially generation, is a very high risk to us. And part of my reasoning is they offer 12 hours of consulting services on electric, not the 40, it was 12. And it wasn't until they came back for a second interview that they raised it to 40, but originally it was 12. The hours, Gina, I think you may be able to speak to the number of hours that they've put in, but they were going to charge us $250 an hour for every hour over the 12 hours that they were going to work with us. Well, one of the claims, as you note in here, has been open since 2020. And so the cost would be tremendous to Lakeland Electric. Plus, part of the interview was really being able to ask, what about generation? They don't have that experience in generation. Could they hire people? Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm sure this is a very quality organization. But what do we know? I know Gallagher does have people on staff that they don't charge us for that has a proven track record of finding us savings over time, and that comes directly from Gina and her team telling us that. So that kind of, for me, for my scoring, that put Gallagher ahead of Brown and Brown for the interview piece. To answer your question, but
which is why you have a provision for exception, even though we push as much as possible to do local preference.
Yeah, I was actually in the same boat with Mike. I rated Brown and Brown higher just by looking at the RFP, but during the interview process, I felt they did a much better presentation. They were focused on what I feel were the big issues, of the city's big issues. Like Mike said, they focused on the power generation side. They recognized that that was our biggest exposure, which it is. I mean, 2/3 of our property, our insured property, is Lakeland Electric's. So I changed my mind after the interview.
Any comments or questions?
That's great. Yeah, great answer.
Commissioner Mann, anything?
No, good. I'm just really glad for this dialogue, because if you just look at it on paper, it doesn't, add up. So
Well, 'cause we fight so hard for
Right.
local preference to be able to
And we'll
justify.
continue to.
Yeah.
You know, and Brown and Brown can learn from this too, in the process that for their futures. And that's all part of that process, because we want to encourage growth on our local preference. But on the other hand, on Gallagher, in terms certainly of the decision-making process here, this is a wonderful display of why it's important to know all the nuances and to work through them. And so grateful for committees that do that well.
I'd still like to, the 3-year, I would like it shorter than that, just to echo when Commissioner Franklin was here, that, going through this process, because I think going through it, we never want to discourage other people from participating in the RFP, and I hope that that's not an unintended consequence of this, that Brown and Brown and other companies won't come back in the future, like, well, Gallagher's been doing it 17 years, now they're on year 18. I don't want to discourage that dialogue, because I do think, and Joyce and I have had extensive conversations about the process, that it's very nuanced and it has a lot of disciplines, but it's just like us sitting in these chairs as incumbents in the political realm. I mean, they know us. They should know us. after 17 years. I mean, they should know every inch of everything we do. So it's really hard for a different company to come in and not know those nuances. And yes, they should do, to Mike's point, and those conversations were very back and forth for all of us, is that they should understand that utility is our number one risk. Absolutely. So I wouldn't want to discourage them from not coming back in the future. And, they were still neck and neck, even before, the interview score is really not even 100 points difference. So you're looking at a tight race. And I just wouldn't want other companies to be discouraged by it. And I think we've heard that, over the years that we've been sitting here, that companies are like, why would I even participate?
And on the same side of that coin, on the other side of that coin is the fact that we do want to compliment Gallagher for what they've done.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And we're grateful for that. So it can seem dismissive of that, and we're not saying that at all.
Right.
Well, and I think we didn't have the dialogue before.
Right.
That's
We
right.
would just rubber stamp it. And so the whole point is so that people listening can say, oh, okay, so that generation piece is huge. I've got to, sharpen my pencil on that and figure that out.
And it can't be open-ended, Okay, good. Any other comments? All right, then that takes us then to, my thing here, back to the attorney first reading.
All right, the one ordinance for first reading is a resubmittal of the Lakeland Square apartment complex issue. They have resubmitted at 211 units, down from 244 units previously, which I think just represents reducing the 2 4-story buildings to 3-story. I think they also have added some parking spaces. We can go into it a little bit if you want to. I don't want to discourage you getting the background information you need on this. This will only be first reading. We're going to do the full first and second reading on this one.
And since we have 3 people absent, can we just do the first reading and do that background on Monday?
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure, one part, for me, I didn't really want a continuance, except to use it as leverage to see if we had a conversation with the school board with regard to the queuing at the middle school, and then also with the county with regard to any kind of traffic mitigation strategies that we could implement.
And we have had those conversations. Kind of stepping back, Ryan Lazenby's developed a concept for the entire corridor from Cleveland Heights back to Florida Avenue, including the Florida Avenue intersection. For our purposes at this point, we've been focused on the area from the school over to Cleveland Heights. And so we had a conversation with them probably a month ago to at least explore getting the turn lanes extended from Cleveland Heights to the west side of the school to handle the queuing coming in off the road. Looks like that's certainly doable. We received cost estimates from the county based on the West Pipkin Road improvements just on the other side of Florida. We're probably somewhere in the $1.5 million range to do that turn lane extension, which gets into questions of kind of financing and funding from both the city and the county. So in terms of what we have in the narrative, ultimately it's going to end up being a budget decision on the city side, as well as working with the county on seeing what they have to bring to the table in terms of that portion of the road improvement. The impact fee collections are still more than what we would have with retail on that site. Certainly not as much at 211 units versus 244, but we could make a substantial dent in the cost of that by applying impact fees to that portion of roadway. We've also talked to the school district about adjusting their dismissal hours, because right now it's relatively unique in that middle school's dismissal time is really at the start of the PM peak, right around 4 o'clock, and so they asked us what time we would suggest, and we suggested 3:30. Haven't heard anything back on that yet, but at least their transportation folks and superintendent level are taking our request seriously. They're also receptive to working with us on accepting stormwater, the additional stormwater, from the widened roadway, as well as utility adjustments to the utility easements as well. So I think we've had a lot of very good conversation.
Good progress.
But ultimately, it's going to be a budget decision from both the city and the county, and kind of working that out, over the next few months, certainly. But there are options that are out there. We're certainly encouraged in the county and the school district to have been receptive to working with us to getting something done in that corridor.
Okay, and what about the church across the street from the school, since that would be going through the county, right, not the city? So we don't know what would be approved there or what they're going to allow for traffic.
Exactly. As far as anything on the south side of the road is outside of our control. It looks like that the right-of-way line is pretty well held along the south side of the road, and that there have been, over the years, additional rights-of-way acquired on the north side. There is a gap between the school and the public's property. I mean, you pretty much have residential on both sides in that little section there. But we haven't seen anything in terms of the church, other than what was, I think, approved a couple of years ago, 2 or 3
The
years ago.
sidewalk in front of it anyway.
There's a sidewalk in front of it, so we would not do anything with that at this point. It would just be going from there north towards the school.
Well, because if we, obviously, this is just for the listening public. I mean, this is where it's difficult, because we don't know. What if they approve a charter school and they have a line queuing at the same time as the school across the street? So, like we kind of had on New Jersey Road, a similar situation with the church, then it was a school. So, that's why, I really hate that the onus is on this developer, to modify their plans and spend money on all of their architectural renderings, and when the real problem is something that, by state is, the tool is taken away from us to talk about the failing road nature. And so to me, it's like incumbent upon us to have the discussion anyway, whether we can use that as our decision-making point or not. We better be talking to all of the people who are partners on that road for all of the quality of life of the folks who live in the county and in the city in that neighborhood.
Absolutely, and one of the things we were doing now more on a continuous basis is reviewing the Development Review Committee agendas from the county. So anything that comes through that at least involves a zoning/land use change, we get a chance to take a look at it, provide comments back to staff. If it's something that goes straight to site plan, certainly we just have to keep an eye on what's going on out there and try to catch it the best that we can. But, certainly the county staff understands that this is an important issue, this is an important corridor, and that anything that happens through there, that we need to work together on it.
So do you think would we know what that church is zoned for? Like, if it had to be changed to a school, it would make me feel better, because then it would go through a public hearing, and then we'd know that they're going to be setting up car line queues on that road.
We can certainly find that out.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions, comments?
It's empty right now, isn't it?
There's-
It's for sale.
It's been for sale
6
for a while.
years.
From the conference.
And all we need is for it to sell to a school, and then just to prove more traffic on that road.
So I'm obviously trying to be careful with this one, with any controversial land use zoning case like this, to avoid creating some kind of issue for appeal.
Right.
So I heard the request to have this presented by staff on Monday. If that's the case, I just think that we need to try to avoid discussions as to the merits of the case. Keep your mind open on the matter, and really just use money for background information. And it's not a noticed public hearing. The noticed public hearing will be June 6th. So comments from the audience, from the applicant, should be very limited, strictly to just questions about factual questions, and try to avoid opening up a forum for commenting on the merits of it. I know we have an audience portion at the end of the agenda, and there's
Certainly going to have.
that's open, but during the presentation on the agenda, I think it should be limited to staff to the greatest extent possible.
We'll set it up that way when we talk about it.
Just only facts.
Right. But that way, at least at the first reading, we can make sure that everything is out. It's closed. Okay, great. Resolution B.
All right, B1 is somewhat of a housekeeping matter. We're required by IRS rules to restate our defined contribution plan from time to time. So that's what this is doing, is simply comply with IRS regulations. It will not affect the benefits to our employees, and it will not affect the contribution required of the city to the plan. It's really just a technical update of the plan in accordance with IRS regulations. This is being recommended by our outside pension attorney.
Yeah, Commissioner McConnell.
How many times have we updated it since '04, or was that the last time?
Sherry, do you know?
I know we've at least updated it twice, but anytime the IRS makes us do something, and that's what this is, and today they
So we go in.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
And then July is our cutoff. We have to have it done by July.
Thank you.
Good.
All right.
Unfortunately, that's sooner than we'd all like to think. All right.
All right, the next item is a renewal of the outside protection agreement that we have had with Polk County for quite some time. We agree to cover areas in the unincorporated area adjacent to city limits that where the county does not really have the coverage to provide what they need in that area. In exchange for the city covering these areas, the county agrees to pay us a percentage of their fire assessments fee collected from properties in the areas that we are serving. So under this agreement, it's a 5-year deal, and the county will pay us 65% of their fire assessment fee in those areas. I know we have the fire chief here, and the area has changed slightly from what it was, and you can...
It actually changed quite a bit. So the current contract was set to expire September 30th, so we were going to have to renegotiate anyway. But in the past couple of years, the county's been planning, and they've built 2 new fire stations, one at Kathleen at Duff Road, there at, right there across from Duff Road where the new Publix is, but also they built one at Galloway and Sutton. That one is close enough to some of the OPA areas that they were paying us to cover that they're taking that back because they no longer need us. It's in the 5-mile radius, and they're going to cover that. So there are portions of the OPA that we have been covering forever, west, a little piece southwest, and a little bit northwest that they're taking back. So our OPA now, the new contract, it will be mostly in the northeast. And then we had one piece in the north that was a modified OPA where they only did 15% of their revenue. Well, it was modified because we were only sending a single resource to only structure fires and fire alarms. And you guys remember a conversation a while back where we had some concerns about the south side of the airport with all that new development with Riverside and Morgan Creek and all those down there. And so what we propose and what this contract will include is we're going to continue to provide that service to that area north with a single resource and only structure fires and fire alarms. And then we're going to reciprocate that from their dual road station to those areas down there. So what that means for us is if their fire engines are in-house, when the calls come in, we never know, us or them, but if they're in-house, they should get there a minute or 2 quicker than us to initiate a rescue and a fire attack, and then the cavalry will come around on their heels, and we'll come in and it'll still be our scene.
And it's come from McCarley first.
So how do we factor those runs into our response times?
Yes.
Okay.
And if we do a new station, you renegotiate as well.
That's correct. Yeah, and the old contract and the new contract has language for, either party can modify or cancel the contract with a 90-day written notice, and they've done that for changing this.
You said 65%, isn't it 68%?
68% was in the previous contract prior to this one. And this one goes back even Chief Ballard, before he retired, and we renegotiated the contract prior to the existing one. It used to be that it was only 55%, and then in that negotiation, we got it up to 68 over that, I think it was a 5-year period, but in the current proposal, it would go back down to 65, but still much better than the 55 that it was prior to that previous contract.
And I can remember a time I think we were at 40%. So yeah, it's come quite a way since then.
Okay. Everybody's good with that. I'm looking for eyeballs.
Well, and part of that also, is, and somewhat, you could say is for consideration of that assistance that we're getting now on the south side of the airfield that we did not have previously.
Okay, any other questions? Great. Next item is consent, so make sure we like this.
This is a software license agreement that we have with Pictometry International Corporation. This is to enhance some of the existing systems that work with our GIS technology, like aerial photography, that type of thing. It includes some interesting components like 3D mesh technology, which is basically taking a 3D version of an object, and we use it for planning purposes with our buildings. We can do 3D tours, and also for site layout and location for our utilities and landscaping. With the increased reliance on city GIS technology with city operations, this is an important tool, as well as this software license agreement will also provide the public access to utilize online aerial photography. That's created different aspects of what we provide. and this is a 3-year agreement. The total cost is $93,720.40. That is included in IT's FY 2022 budget, and that includes all maintenance of the software as well for that 3-year period.
And this gets charged to Lakeland Electric?
No, this is Department of,
GI's Division of IT.
yeah.
Okay, got it.
Because it's used citywide, so obviously Lakeland Electric uses it, community development, CRA,
Police and fire.
water, police and fire,
Everybody
citywide
gets to use
use,
it, but
everybody
just-
gets to use it.
And this year, for the first time, the citizens would get to use it as well.
Which is nice, yes.
That's so raise my hand up.
Commissioner Madden.
I think Commissioner McCarley's going to be so excited that people can get their Google image whenever they want. Okay.
And also, the most accurate we've ever been able to get is down to 3-inch resolution.
That's impressive.
Very nice. So really relatively affordable.
Yes.
Well,
And if you scroll through your agenda packet, there is an example of a sample image so you can see how the building's that 3-dimensional look. I think it's page 17 of 22, just to give you an idea. Which is kind of neat.
very nice.
And
So
that
we'll
is
leave that on consent? Yes, okay. Did you ever think you'd get into some of these things?
I've learned a lot about a lot of different things. I never thought I'd be doing any utility work or IT. I feel like I'm a dinosaur. I still like my notepad and my pen, but I'm learning from these guys, so that's good.
Great. No finance director report, utility.
The first item that we have under utility, this is an agreement with Burns and McDonnell. This is for a rate study to evaluate Lakeland Electric's tariffs. And part of this, we'll look at the rate study. Burns and McDonnell will be providing a cost allocation, cost of services analysis, rate design recommendations, as well as evaluating phasing in rate increases based on future capital and generation needs for Lakeland Electric. Based on the need for the rate study, the last time we did this was in 2018. So staff is looking to implement a rate study that would, upon your approval, the completion of that would be through December 2022. The city's purchasing department issued an RFP. We had a number of proposals submitted, and if you look at the companies, you'll see Raftelis was actually the low bidder by about $7,000, and one of the reasons that Burns and McDonnell was selected that received a higher ranking by the evaluation of staff was Raftelis has more focus on water utility rates, and that's what their area of expertise is. So in order to, we needed that focus on electric utility, and that's the background that Burns and McDonnell brings. And the total cost of this would be $95,000. That's included in Lakeland Electric's FY22 budget. And as Burns and McDonnell goes through this evaluation process and has deliverables, there'll be presentations made to the utility committee for discussion in terms of workshops and things. So you'll be kept apprised of how the rate study is coming along as well.
Questions on that? And that also is on consensus. Is that A-okay? Really? Okay. Next.
The next agreement that we have is with Trenois. This is for a precast concrete trench out at McIntosh Power Plant with the demolitions of units 1, 2, and 3. We're going to require to move some of the electrical supplies that existed from those units and then repowering them to other areas. And in terms of evaluating how that was done, the most cost-effective way of doing this is to have a precast concrete trench system that will be able to withstand vehicular traffic of a certain weight limit, 335,000 pounds, and also can be pretty versatile for future use if additional, without having to do additional excavation. The city's purchasing department did approve this as a sole source purchase. The Trenwell will provide the design and equipment and materials. That should be delivered by June of 2022. And then after the delivery, we'll go out for bid for a contractor to actually do the installation of the trench. The total cost of the design and supplies, it's $177,840. That is included in Lakeland Electric's FY22 budget. And I know I had some questions in terms of when I was trying to picture what this concrete, what this precast concrete trench looks like. So this is an example, just to kind of give you an idea of where the facilities will be, and then that's how it's covered as well.
That you drive, that's the cover you drive over.
Yes.
The 177 that we're looking at is design alone
Design and materials.
and materials.
Not installation.
Okay, and installations about what do we expect to be?
In this particular instance, we have right at about 800 feet that we have to run, and we currently have electrical contractors on site that's doing part of the repowering, and we think that it's going to be somewhere in the $40,000 to $50,000 range, roughly in 3 to 4 weeks time frame. The advantage of the Trenway system is that you dig the trench, you prepare the bedding, you level it, you set them down, you lay cables in, and then you're done.
You're done. And it's flexible later.
Yes, sir.
And if you had to add cables, you could.
Yes, sir.
It's not real big, but it is long.
Right.
Yes. Yeah, it's only 40 inches wide. That also helps to support, our biggest thing is we have mixed voltages in this cable, so we need it wider so that we can keep the segregation on how we're repowering things out of the plant.
Cool. Great. Any other questions? Yes, Commissioner Mann.
So just since it's in bright red, this price is valid for 30 days from the day of this quotation. I'm just curious with our purchasing, that seems like a type from the date of this quotation, 30 days. I know with supply chain issues and everything like that, are we within that window?
Yeah, we are in that window. We've already contacted them, and we've already have purchased a smaller portion of the Trenway system to get us through some other issues. And so we're there with them, and they already know the site, and they did this here to turn around. The other company that also does that in this here area is Old Castle, and Old Castle has been totally unresponsive. We can't get them to come and talk to us. These people here, ironically, not ironically, but the other benefit here is that these Trenway trenches are actually poured here in Lakeland. They're done here locally for us, and so they get it to us faster, and so the time frame doesn't bother us. But we've been working with them. They would agree that they could extend this if we needed, but we didn't need it.
Okay, good. Thank you.
So Commissioner Madden's concern is price adjustment won't take place after the fact.
Right.
And Commissioner Madden also, when we review all these documents and quotes come in, a lot of times I'll see if it doesn't get to the commission prior to that quote expiring, we'll go back and ask that you need to rewrite the quote, give us an extension on date so we can get it before the commission for approval so that price doesn't fluctuate or change. So when we bring it to you, that's going to be the final amount as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions next?
The last utility item we have is an agreement with Powell Electrical Systems. These are for medium voltage switchgear lineups. These are switches that basically control power distribution to control, protect, and isolate the electrical equipment. And these particular switchgears will be connected to our RICE engines once they are delivered, and we'll send that power. That'll be the power connection between the substation as well as the transformers to the rest of the plant for auxiliary loads. The city's purchasing department, they issued an invitation to bid back in March. We received proposals back from 6 contractors. Powell was selected as the most responsible bidder, also with the lowest price as well. After receiving the bids, Sargent & Lundy, which is our consulting engineer on the project, reviewed the city's specifications and wanted to make a few minor adjustments. So there is an additional $24,239 that was added to Powell's original bid to increase the proposed bid price to $1,089,226. That includes the design, manufacture, and shipment of the equipment to the plant. And the total cost of this is included in the bond expenditure that you had previously approved as well as part of the RICE project.
Questions on that? Commissioner McCarley's taking this from her.
Any questions for Ramona? Thank you, Ramona.
Yeah, I wanted to go back to the short-term rental thing that you're going to hear about on Monday, just to give you a little bit of background on that. I don't know how much you've heard about that, but it's apparently a growing phenomenon, particularly in the Lake Morton Historic District and maybe in some other areas as well. Jared, I think you maybe looked at the Airbnb website and determined that there was how many in that area?
Well, I think Brian could probably speak to that a little bit more informative than I. We've been told somewhere around 200, but I think we've been...
Good morning. That's closer to citywide. I mean, that was the data that I shared with you from one of the companies that works with tax collectors and local governments to manage the short-term rental phenomenon, as Palmer called it. So that's not limited to South Lake Morton.
So there's growing concern about the issue amongst some homeowners in that area. It's another issue, however, where we're faced with a state preemption. We keep bumping into that issue that's complicating the issue. The state has preempted the regulation of public lodging establishments. Over the last 10 years or so, they have backed off of that preemption with respect to what they call vacation rentals. So now the preemption is somewhat more limited with respect to vacation rentals. The state says that the local government cannot prohibit them. They cannot regulate the duration or frequency of the rental of vacation rentals. The Attorney General has opined on some of the changes to the legislation over the years and has concluded that the legislature does allow local government to regulate some aspects of the operation of these things, provided you're not prohibiting the use of vacation rentals or effectively prohibiting them through owners type regulations. An example of that that the Attorney General has opined on was a proposed regulation to impose spacing requirements, as well as a limit that what percentage of houses in a particular neighborhood can be used for a short-term rental or a vacation rental. And the Attorney General opined that those types of regulations can have the effect of prohibiting the use of certain properties for short-term rentals, and that's preempted by the state legislation. But nonetheless, the legislature has opened the door somewhat for the regulation of aspects of the operation of these things, like parking or even occupancy limits can be addressed somewhat. So there are some things you can do to address it if that is something that you want to do. But on Monday, I'm sure you're going to hear that this is a growing issue in some of our neighborhoods around here. Just want to give you a little legal background on where we are with that, though.
Commissioner Music.
What are we seeing, just like we were talking about like the duck hunting, we have a few other municipalities that have dealt with it in separate ways. Do we have any other examples to lean on?
Yeah, some communities have created registries where the owners of these vacation rentals are required to register a local contact. So if there's a big party going on or some kind of issue with a vacation rental, there's a local contact that you can call to try to come and address it. Jared, I know you've looked at this a lot in some of the regulations in other jurisdictions.
Yeah, there's basically two different types of situations that you see across the state, because the preemption applies only to post-2011 regulations. So a lot of cities, particularly the tourist hub type cities, they had short-term rental regulations on the books prior to 2011. They're grandfathered in. And so places like Daytona, St. Augustine, Miami, they had regulations prior, so they had a little bit more flexibility with the preemption. When you look at the regulations that were enacted post-2011, what you're seeing is what Palmer talked about, or where they create these registry programs. You have to have a contact Some of them put occupancy limits in place. One of the ones that I looked at specifically was Flagler County. That was, their ordinance was litigated, and the court did uphold it as a post-preemption regulation, and they've set occupancy limits. They required scaled drawings of the interior. They required hardwired smoke and carbon monoxide detectors. They required a parking space for each room that was going to be rented out, and then they created sort of a variance process for property owners that might not be able to meet those requirements to be able to still have the vacation rental under certain conditions. But those are the types of things we're seeing. Registries, occupancy limits, parking requirements, smoke detectors. Those are the things that if you're post-2011, that's what communities have been doing.
And we don't really have anything pre-2011 that at least expressly address short-term rentals, so it would be a difficult argument to make that we're grandfathered in with respect to our regulations.
Commissioner Bowden, you have any?
No, I just thought Commissioner Walker might want to just talk about it, because I know every year FLC it's a priority. I mean, every year FLC is on short-term rentals, because we haven't been the hottest attraction, so we haven't had to worry about it as much. But, the coastal cities, and they're always advocating for some rights to the state to be able to at least do things that keep all their lovely neighborhoods from becoming overrun with parties and spring break, things. So, Commissioner Walker might just have a perspective to share on Monday too.
But it's a very litigious area, as you can imagine. There are a lot of investor owners that have had, their ability to rent restricted or taken away, and they've litigated. So, but there is some room for certain regulations.
There are a couple in our neighborhood, so it popped up. Okay. Any other questions or comments? So what about commissioner comments? We're at the end. I have one question for Chuck. So I was approached about the road diet shockingly this week. And so when I started thinking about it, the city commission was pulled into that discussion, to say the city has to work, it's up to us, and we voted on the test, and historically, all that stuff. When you look south of Edgewood Drive and all those medians that have been put in, down between South Edgewood all the way almost to the Parkway, those concrete medians, that didn't come before us.
No, and there's a difference. Is that what happened south of Edgewood was more in the overall access management realm, and so that went through a public hearing process. Now, since that was done, now only DOT requires a public meeting, not a hearing, but city commission action isn't required for something where you're just affecting the median or the access of the roadway. Where the commission has been brought into a greater level here is that taking lanes off of the state highway triggers through their lane elimination process, DOT's own lane elimination process, the commission action on that issue. Now with the area south of Edgewood, really what's out there now is kind of the second round of what was discussed probably 6 or 7 years ago, where the commission was engaged and actually had asked that southern portion be deferred to see what happens with crash rates and things. That's when we ended up with the medians installed, or pedestrian islands installed from Oak Street north towards Beacon Hill.
Right.
And so that was almost kind of the second round of a two-step process, and the commission was engaged in that, but they did not have to take a formal action.
It's hard in discussing with the public, and then I just sort of had the epiphany of, those ones, because I have heard complaints about those too, for people they have to go past their offices and U-turn and come back. And then didn't have the access with that free-flowing middle turn lane, south. So I've heard that, but I was like, there's so much more emphasis on the road diet. I was just curious as to the DOT, what their roles are and when they pull us in and when they don't. So thank you. Yes.
Well, so if you brought that up, then anyway, I'm just changing my attitude about the road diet and just embracing it, and I'm riding my bike right along the sidewalk. I know it's probably illegal, but there's nowhere else to ride safely, and so we're in the middle of construction, and everyone's like, no one's walking or riding their bike. Isn't this supposed to make this more pedestrian bike friendly? And so I'm trying to figure out, as for myself, like, what is the hardest parts to navigate? And it was AJ that was my inspiration. You should he needs a gold star because now I'm riding my bike to my meetings and to a lot more places when I can. When the rain starts, then I'm going to be in a little bit of trouble. I don't have an umbrella for my bike. Plus, I'd probably get, struck by lightning. But I am curious about, it is really hard for me, like, to think of the money that we spend on, like, New York Avenue bicycle track, and I try to incorporate that into my ride. It is hard to incorporate.
Well, somebody does.
I mean, it is hard to incorporate because then when I'm coming from, the Beacon Hill and I get over like Missouri area and then I have to like go down, or even when I come home from City Hall, I've got to go across to get onto the New York bike lane and then go up the little hill and over like cross town. So, I know we're doing so much to try to make our, bike paths better and, we're improving it. I think it's all great in theory. And so I thought, really, if we want to be more bike friendly and we want people to actually utilize microtransit as we're urbanizing and having density downtown, I think it's incumbent upon us to be like, okay, what do real bike riders have to face, just like we do with ADA compliance? I mean, we have money towards ADA, but we have Jenny who talks to real people who are in real, situations to get their pinch points, how it is for them to navigate, instead of us just saying, oh, we think we should have a ramp on this road, that no one uses. So I just would really encourage, city staff and my colleagues to think about when we're modifying this, because we want, when I got back from Belgium, I was so inspired. It's like the Tour de France every day on the roads. But that takes not only, adoption of bicycle riding. You've got to feel safe enough. And then you've got to have your motorists, feel like, instead of thinking that stupid bike rider who, just pulled out in front of me, what are they doing on the road? It's like, no, great, I'm so glad more people are bike riding because they're not going to take my parking space. and now I don't have as much traffic. Like, thinking of it as a positive and that people could actually adopt to microtransit, especially in our urban core. If you live in our suburban sprawl areas, then you just keep the suburban sprawl car-centric model. But how do we really inculcate this and foster this kind of ecosystem that is microtransit, pedestrian, walking, scooters, golf carts, the squeeze friendly? And so that is what I'm hopeful that with CRA's mapping of the Dixieland area, and just going into our urban core, that we really do kind of collectively think about, like, not just in theory, if people rode a bike, there's a stripe on the busy road that they could ride on and get killed. But rather, no, like, it is, we are the best place to bike, to work, to play. And I'm not like a bike person that rides for sport. I'm really just trying to adopt it more as transportation. My kids are home from college, and then they can use my car, and I can use a bike. And I'm just trying to think of it as that multimodal approach. So I hope that's in the diet reporting.
It is, and in fact, it's interesting that with the temporary, and I keep stressing, the concrete islands on Florida Avenue today are temporary. When those temporary islands were installed, that gap between the island and the sidewalk, I don't think any of us 2.5 years ago would have thought that there is as much bicycle traffic using that, even though it is not a bike facility. And so, but what it has done is it has shown us that there is a demand out there to provide something in the Florida Avenue corridor. And I live 2 blocks off the corridor. I drive it every day. I drive I know what's going on the side streets, everything else, because it's in my front yard. And what surprised me is that, my thinking was that people would use the alleys or New York or Missouri or Success or South, and really there is a demand for folks to use Florida Avenue itself. And so that's something we absolutely have to take into consideration when we look at the ultimate cross-section, whatever it ends up being, is wider sidewalks or bike facilities, wider sidewalks and bike facilities. That's all part of the equation that, this test has, I think, given us the ability to look at. Also, it is interesting to see the additional pedestrian traffic that is out there. A lot of that, I think, is because of, the college, continues to grow and expand and becomes more vibrant, and it has an effect on Florida Avenue. The businesses on Florida Avenue are growing as well. There is more foot traffic on that corridor. And so that's something that DOT has quantified at specific intersections, because it's hard to collect data in terms of people just walking down sidewalks if they're not at a signalized intersection. I think that's where we want to hear from the businesses, okay, well, how much of your traffic, how much of your customer base are walking or biking? And that's what we need to hear from them as we go through this process to verify the observations. And then, I think in terms of New York Avenue, because of the costs of our transportation system, we have to do this incrementally. And so I think it's hard, and it's our job to communicate to the public that, what is happening there is part of a larger system that we're having to implement incrementally because of the cost. And that's why West Lake Hunter Trail is critical, the overpass to Lake Wire, and Lake Wire itself is critical. And then what happens in other development sites where we are actually being approached about incorporating the trail into redevelopment in the downtown area. So that's what our job is to communicate how those pieces of the puzzle get together. And that's, you look at Sykes Boulevard in the downtown area, heck, that was probably built in the 70s, mid-70s, and it wasn't until around 1990 that the north-south route was built all the way down to Drainfield Road before the Parkway was built. Probably folks 40 years ago were sitting there going, well, that's silly. But it takes time to put those pieces of the puzzle together, but if we don't start somewhere, we'll never get there. But it's just, and that's what we need to communicate through this whole process.
Thank you. On the transit note, the microtransit note, the squeeze is fare-free starting today, this evening at 5 o'clock. So everybody go ride the squeeze downtown and get something to eat. Why are you looking at me like that?
Why is it free?
Why is it free? Because we haven't even delved into sponsorships or advertising dollars or anything, and we really, it's a hindrance to have the driver click on this as a safety issue. So we're going to test it and see how it is fare-free. We have as many riders on that right now last week as we do in our circulators that are on either side of South Florida Avenue. So we're excited about it. That was with Mayfair. Yay.
Mayor Pro Tem, if I may, just a couple of things. Since we've mentioned the one request to appear, I just wanted to draw attention to there is another request to appear from a citizen, and it's related to Carpenter's Way and some of the development that's happening around there and pending proposals as well. So there is another request to appear on Monday. And then if I may, I also would like to ask our communications director, Kevin Cook, to make an announcement about our Red, White, and Kaboom July 3rd, 4th celebration.
Thank you, Sean. So July 3rd, our Red, White, and Kaboom Independence Day celebrations, always on July 3rd. We have another great event. I want to personally right now thank the Mims family. The Mims family has been donating to this event since 2009. And if you look at their sponsorship dollars over time, it adds up to a lot of money. So if you see Tom and Paula Mims out in the community, just thank them for that. And then what we'll do as well, after the city commission, after the event, during a city commission meeting, we'll bring them up and recognize them as well. But the event's July 3rd. We got great entertainment. Andrew Love and his band, the franchise players. We've got a number of food trucks. It's going to be a fantastic event. It's more popular than ever. But July 3rd, if you're in town, stop by. Awesome night. Thanks, Sean.
Thank you.
And to add to the bicycle thing, I would ride my bike to work every day if we had a shower facility because I'm a frothy mess.
All right. Seeing no further business, and we don't need to talk about that. We're going to adjourn. Safe travels. Yes.
Looking forward to it. It'll be a lot of airtime. Today. One way.
Wow.
From New York.
How many hours?